My wife cheated with the town vet, while I worked 70-hour weeks, so I served divorce papers at their family Thanksgiving dinner and walked away. I'm a 31-year-old male who was married to Becky, a 27-year-old female for 4 years. We met back in college when I was finishing my business degree, and she was studying marketing. I first saw her at a tailgate before the homecoming game. She kept glancing over at our group, and eventually she came over with her friends. She tried the classic accidental bump move, but ended up spilling her drink all over my favorite jersey. I laughed it off and said something cheesy like, "Guess you owe me dinner now." She got flustered, turned red and kept apologizing, but she ended up taking my number. We started dating, and those early days were pretty good. We'd stay up late talking about everything: her upbringing with strict religious parents, my experience of losing my dad at 15 while helping my mom keep our family farm running. We'd hang out in my truck, gazing at the stars and making plans. She would sketch house designs while I talked about farming, which somehow didn't bore her to death. After dating for 2 years, I proposed at her favorite spot by the lake. I spent a lot on a ring that made her cry when she saw it. That night, she told me she wanted to have my kids someday. Fast forward, and I thought I had everything: a solid marriage, my own farm, and a future I worked hard to build. Nothing was handed to me. Every cent came from working 70-hour weeks, taking out loans and making smart investments in equipment and land. I turned 40 acres of poor soil into a productive operation that made nearly $300,000 last year. I had no problem giving Becky the life she wanted. When we got married, we both said we wanted the same things: kids, family, the works. But about a year in, Becky started saying, "Let's wait on the kids thing." It wasn't what I signed up for, but I wasn't going to force her to become a mom when she wasn't ready. So I put more energy into our life together. She wanted a rustic dream, so I bought us a small farm outside of town. But let me tell you, Becky's idea of rustic was expensive. She wanted a fancy thoroughbred horse that cost 6 figures because regular horses weren't good enough. The thing barely got ridden. It just stood in the pasture looking pretty while I paid $2,000 a month for special feed, vet care, and a trainer. Then she needed imported Brahman cows because regular cows didn't match her aesthetic. I swear she once said our Herefords were too basic. And don't even get me started on the trucks. A brand new diesel every year because last year's model wasn't cool enough. I paid for all of it though, thinking that as long as she was happy, it was worth it. Now here's where things went wrong. One day Becky's best friend Emily texted me, saying we needed to talk urgently and asked to come by when Becky wasn't home. I figured she was planning a surprise party for Becky or something. Emily and I were never super close. She was Becky's friend from high school, always struggling with money. The type who constantly posts about her hustle on social media, but never seems to get ahead. She works as a vet during the day and bartends on weekends at the Rusty Nail to keep her small one-bedroom apartment. Recently, she had been dropping hints about wanting to start a small business, some kind of organic pet food venture. She wouldn't stop talking about how regular pet food is basically poison and how her special recipes cured her cat's digestive issues. A couple of months back, she asked if I'd consider investing in her startup or if I knew people who might. I said maybe, but didn't think much about it. She wasn't exactly a go-getter, more like someone who jumps from $1 million idea to the next without doing anything. When she showed up at my place, I immediately noticed something was off. She texted me 5 minutes away to make sure Becky was gone. When she came in, she seemed nervous. "You want coffee?" I asked, trying to keep things normal. "No, this won't take long," she said, then pulled out a folder and dropped it on the kitchen table. "You need to see this." At first, I thought it was her business plan or a loan application she wanted me to co-sign. But when I opened it, I was hit with a documentary of my marriage going down the toilet. Screenshots, photos, videos, hotel receipts, the whole 9 yards. Becky was having an affair with Dr. Jason Cooper, the town vet, the same guy who charged me $5,000 last year when one of our horses had colic, and who then had the nerve to send a Christmas card featuring a picture of his perfect family. Meanwhile, my wife, Katie, devotes her time to teaching Sunday school to the little kids at church and organizing the annual charity auction. Jesus Christ, was all I could say as I flipped through the pages. There were over 70 pages of evidence in that folder. Emily had organized it by date, with sticky notes explaining what each item was. It was scary efficient. The pictures were graphic, with timestamps showing them together in hotels when she was supposed to be at her mom's, helping with the church fundraiser. Security camera footage from our driveway showed his truck arriving 20 minutes after I left for a 3-day trip to look at a combine in Nebraska, and footage of them coming out together 2 days later, holding hands and kissing by his truck. There were screenshots of hundreds of texts between them going back 8 months. "Can't wait till he leaves again. Don't worry, baby. He doesn't suspect a thing." Reading that felt like getting kicked in the chest by one of those Brahman cows. She had to have been with him every time Becky went on a girls' trip. Every time I drove to another state to get farm equipment, they'd be at my house, in my bed. The security footage showed his truck at our place overnight. At least 11 times while I was away, there was a receipt. For a hotel in Memphis from a weekend, she told me. She was at a girls' spa retreat with Emily and 2 other friends. The funny thing is, Emily was in the Bahamas that weekend. I remember because she posted 50 beach pictures on social media. So who were these other friends Becky was with? Nobody. Just her and Dr. Cooper in a suite I was paying for. And here's where things get worse. She's pregnant, not with my child but with the vets. I took her to the doctor because I was worried something was wrong. Meanwhile, she's sending him selfies with captions like, "Your baby is making me sick today. Can't wait to tell him it's his, so he'll stop asking for kids." There's a screenshot of their conversation from 3 weeks ago. Her saying, "I think I'm going to have to tell him soon." Starting to show a little. Him replying, "What are you going to tell him?" Her, "That it's his, obviously. He's been wanting kids forever. He'll be so excited he won't even do the math." I had to walk outside after reading that. I stood in the yard for 10 minutes, trying not to puke or punch something. The audacity! She was going to pass off another man's kid as mine, all while probably still cheating with its real dad. When I came back in, Emily was sitting at the table scrolling through her phone like she hadn't just destroyed my life. "How long have you known?" I asked. She put her phone down. "Suspected for about 6 months, had proof for maybe 3. It took a while to gather everything." "Why now? Why tell me?" That's when Emily dropped the real reason. "Look, I know this is messed up," she said, not making eye contact, "but I need to get out of this town. Start fresh. That business idea I told you about? I've got everything planned out. All I need is some capital." I stared at her. "So you want me to invest in your business? Seriously?" She shook her head. "No, not like that. The problem is that Becky knows I took screenshots of our conversations. She caught me scrolling through her phone at girls' night last month when she was in the bathroom. She was texting him right in front of me and forgot to lock her phone. I took the chance to look through their messages and took pics with my phone. She came back early, saw me, and went ballistic. She threatened me, said if I ever told you or anyone else, she'd make sure I regretted it. Said her dad would make sure I never worked in this county again if I showed anyone. She laughed, but it sounded forced. Guess I'm screwed either way. So I figured I'd at least do one decent thing before I leave. Plus, she's been talking trash about me to everyone we know, saying I tried to come on to Jason, but he rejected me. People are starting to believe her. I didn't know if I believed her, but the evidence was real. The timestamps, locations, and pictures all checked out with times Becky was supposedly elsewhere. When I asked Emily how she got all this evidence, she said 2 of her friends helped track Becky, and it took months to collect everything. According to Emily, she just wanted to protect herself. "So what do you want? A loan or an investment?" I asked. "Whatever you want to call it," she said. $50,000. I've got a solid business plan. The organic pet food market is growing like crazy. I just need someone to believe in me." The funny thing is, at that moment I almost respected her hustle. At least she was trying. She was upfront about what she wanted, unlike some people. Plus, by bringing me this information, whatever her reasons, it saved me from living a lie longer. It saved me from raising another man's kid while thinking it was mine, from wasting more years on someone who thought I was an idiot. "Leave your business plan," I told her. "Let me deal with this first, then we'll talk." She nodded, looking relieved as she left. She turned back and said, "For what it's worth, I always thought you deserved better than her." Yeah, right, like I'd fall for that line. But I owed her one, and I always pay my debts. I continued scanning the file. They joked about me, actual jokes, about how clueless I was, how hard I worked while they played. They joked about how convenient it was that I traveled so much for farm stuff, even making jokes about the fancy farm equipment I bought that gave them more time alone because I was busy working. I pulled up our bank statements and started cross-referencing dates and charges. I found at least $115,000 over the past 8 months that I couldn't account for. Cash withdrawals, random charges at jewelry stores for stuff I'd never seen, and a weekend at a cabin rental. But wait, it gets better. I found screenshots of Becky's conversations with her parents. Her folks, straight-laced Pastor Robert and his perfect wife, Susan, knew everything and decided to cover it up to maintain their pure image. Pastor Robert isn't just any pastor. He runs First Baptist, the biggest church in our county with over 500 members. It's the kind of place where everybody who's anybody goes to be seen on Sundays. He drives a brand new Cadillac Escalade, church-owned for ministry purposes. Susan heads up the women's ministry and about 6 different charity committees. These people have been looking down their noses at everyone in town for over 20 years, acting like God's personal representatives on earth. Always talking about moral standards and family values and how the world is going to hell, because people don't follow their rules. They knew their daughter was cheating on me the whole time. There were texts from Becky to her mom. "Mom, I'm freaking out. Emily knows about Jason and me. What if she tells him?" The response was, "Don't worry, honey. Your father will handle it." Emily's mother needs that recommendation letter for her job at the school board. She won't risk that. Another text from her dad to Becky. "We've spoken with Emily. She understands what's at stake. Just be more careful going forward." These were the same people who had me over for Sunday dinner every week. The same man who called me son. The same woman who asked when we were going to make her a grandmother, all while knowing their daughter was cheating on me and pregnant with another man's child. I scrolled through more messages, and it got worse. There was a conversation about how they'd handle the baby situation. Pastor Robert said, "I've been thinking about your situation. I believe the best course is to let him believe the child is his for now. Later, when things settle with Jason's situation, we can look at other options." Jason mentioned relocating his practice, perhaps to the same area. Then, after an appropriate time, you could file for divorce. Consider it penance for your choices. The alternative is significant damage to our family's standing and my position at the church. So there it was. The full plan. Use me as a cover until Jason could leave his wife. Let me believe I was going to be a father. Let me raise another man's kid for a year or two. Then she'd divorce me after an appropriate time and end up with the real father. All to protect her dad's reputation and job. I couldn't believe these were the same people who'd welcomed me into their family, prayed over our marriage at our wedding, and given us a family Bible as a wedding gift, with a handwritten note about honoring your vows before God. The irony. The more I learned, the more it made sense why Becky's parents were so involved in our lives lately, why they'd stop by unannounced, why they'd call Becky multiple times a day. They weren't being caring in-laws. They were managing their daughter's affair. Every Sunday for 4 years, I sat in those pews listening to Pastor Robert preach about integrity, honesty, and godly living. I donated money to their building fund, volunteered at their events, respected them as my spiritual leaders and family, and the whole time, they were playing me for a fool. Not just me, but everyone. By the time I finished going through everything, I put it back in the folder and locked it in my safe. These people thought they were so smart. Well, they were about to learn that farm boys aren't as stupid as they thought. Once I had all the evidence, I didn't mess around. First, I called a divorce lawyer, Marcus, from 3 counties over so nobody in town would find out yet. I spent 48 hours going over everything in my mind, wrestling with what had happened. But when it was time to face the world, I went through my normal routine, pretending like nothing was wrong, partly to gather my thoughts, and partly to watch Becky go about her daily lies. It felt like watching a play, and I was playing the fool. I even sat through Sunday dinner at her parents' house the day after finding out. Pastor Robert said, "Grace, asking God to bless this food and this family." The whole scene was almost comical. On Monday morning, I made the call. I told Becky I had to check on a field with irrigation issues and drove 40 minutes to a Starbucks in the next county. I called from the parking lot. Marcus asked if we had a prenup. We didn't, but our state doesn't recognize community property, which means Becky is only getting what she can prove she contributed. Since she spent more than she ever earned on her failed online boutiques, that isn't much. Plus, the farm was bought by me, which is protected in divorce. She'll be left with no house, no land, no money, just a pile of debt and a baby that isn't mine. With infidelity so well documented, Marcus told me the pregnancy is probably not mine. We're in an excellent position. The court doesn't look kindly on this kind of deception. He walked me through the process, filing temporary orders, discovery, and potential settlement. He advised me to gather financial records, account statements, property deeds, anything showing what I owned before marriage and what was acquired during. I printed bank statements showing withdrawals that matched hotel reservations. I even had recordings of her phone calls, all legal in our one-party consent state. My lawyer was practically high-fiving me over the phone. With this much proof, Becky wouldn't get a cent beyond what the law allows. In fact, given the circumstances, we might even be able to go after her for fraud. The deliberate misrepresentation of the paternity issue alone could constitute legal fraud, not to mention the misappropriation of marital funds to finance the affair. So, if she wanted freedom, she could have it without my bank account funding it. While my lawyer got the paperwork going, I quietly moved most of our liquid assets into accounts only I could access. Not all of it, but enough that if Becky tried to clean out our joint accounts, she wouldn't get much. Then I called a real estate agent, Rick, who specialized in agricultural properties. He came out, checked the operation, and gave me a number 30% higher than I expected. Land values in our area had shot up due to commercial development nearby. It's ready to sell the second the divorce goes through. By the time Becky figures out what's happening, I'll be long gone. I also started looking at places 500 miles away. I found a nice cattle operation in Montana going for less than what my place would sell for. Better water rights, more acreage, and a newer house. I put out a few feelers and made some calls. Nothing definite, but it's good to have options. The worst part was when Becky started dropping hints about the pregnancy, turning down wine at dinner, commenting about feeling nauseous in the morning, buying saltine crackers, all theater for my benefit, laying the groundwork to tell me I was going to be a dad. One night, she cuddled up on the couch, talking about our future, and how maybe it was time to revisit the kids' conversation. I sat there nodding, saying all the right things while feeling nothing. Maintaining the act was exhausting but oddly satisfying. Every lie I caught her in, every fake smile I returned, every knowing nod at her stories reinforced that I was doing the right thing. These people deserved what was coming. Marcus called with updates every few days. The paperwork was coming along. He'd found legal precedents to help our case, and lined up a process server experienced with difficult situations. "How do you want to handle the service?" he asked. "Privately at your home or somewhere public?" "Your call." That's when I started thinking about Thanksgiving. Every year we did a big service at her dad's church, followed by dinner at their huge house filled with relatives, church members, and close friends. The perfect stage. I had a long talk with my farm manager, Mike, who'd been with me for 3 years. He's a solid guy, totally trustworthy. I told him I might need to be away for a while and asked if he could handle things if I had to leave on short notice. Mike nodded. "Whatever you need, boss. Everything will be taken care of." 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I met Emily at a diner 2 towns over. I slid an envelope across the table with a check for $225,000. Half now, half when the dust settles. I told her to show up for Thanksgiving dinner like nothing was wrong. "You're still invited, right?" She nodded. "Susan called yesterday to confirm. I think they're worried I'll blow everything up if they uninvite me." "Good. Just act normal and get there early," I said. She nodded again. "Jason and Katie are coming too. Susan invited them. Last month it would have been even better to have the vet and his wife there. It would have made it perfect. The whole cast would be in one place just 2 nights before Thanksgiving. I was with my buddy Tom in his garage while he worked on his Harley. We've been friends since high school, and he's the only person I told about the situation. "Man, just serve the papers at home and be done with it all." "This isn't necessary," he said. "It's not about drama," I told him. "It's about consequences. These people think they can do whatever they want and walk away clean." "Not this time," Tom shook his head. "Your funeral, man. Just don't expect me to help you hide the bodies." I laughed. No bodies, just well-deserved public humiliation. As I drove home, I felt calmer than I had in weeks. Everything was in place. The papers were ready, and the server was booked. In less than 48 hours, Becky and her family would learn that their perfect plan had a major flaw. They'd forgotten who they were dealing with. I'm not some city boy who curls up and cries when things get tough. I grew up watching crops fail, animals die, and equipment break down at the worst time. When things go wrong on a farm, you don't whine. You clean it up and move on. That's what I was going to do now. Now for the fun part, Thanksgiving. This wasn't just any Thanksgiving in our town. At First Baptist, it's practically a second Christmas. Pastor Robert does a big harvest service in the morning, complete with the church decorated with hay bales and corn stalks. Everyone who's anyone shows up, and then the inner circle gets invited back to the pastor's house for dinner. We're talking 30 to 40 people crammed into their dining room and living room. Susan spends a week baking, though most of it is catered from an upscale place in the city, and she pretends she made it all. Church elders, big donors, family members, and a few special guests trying to impress a recruit. Every year, it's the same routine. We show up early to help set up, which means me hauling chairs and tables while Becky and her mom gossip in the kitchen. Pastor Robert makes a big show of carving the turkey, and then gives a long blessing that's basically a second sermon. 3 days before, I confirmed everything with Marcus. The paperwork was ready. I had multiple copies, one for Becky, one for her parents, and extras just in case, all organized in separate envelopes. The process server, Derek, was booked for 2:01 in the afternoon, right when dinner would start. I called Emily to make sure she was on board. "Everyone's still expecting me there," she confirmed. Susan called yesterday to finalize numbers and said to be there at 1:30. "Perfect. Act normal and make sure your phone is charged." "Why? Are you going to need me to do something?" she asked. "No, but you'll want to record what happens. Trust me." The day before Thanksgiving, Becky was running around baking pies. We'd pretend she made them from scratch, but they were from the bakery in town, just transferred to her pie plates. "Can you pick up my dress from the dry cleaner?" she asked. "And we need to leave by 8 tomorrow to help Mom set up." "No problem," I said, taking the ticket. "Anything else we need?" She thought for a minute. "Maybe some flowers for the centerpiece. Mom always loves when we bring flowers." "Sure thing." I headed into town, picked up her dress, and stopped by the florist. I ordered the most expensive arrangement they had. When the florist asked if I wanted a message, I smiled and said no message. The flowers would speak for themselves. That night I packed a small overnight bag and hid it in my truck, enough clothes for a few days and some cash. I booked a motel 60 miles away. I could hardly sleep, like a kid on Christmas Eve. Except instead of presents, I was waiting to deliver a nuclear bomb to my cheating wife and her hypocrite family. Thanksgiving morning, I woke up early and put on my best suit, the one I saved for weddings and funerals. It seemed appropriate. Becky spent an extra hour on her hair and makeup and put on that new dress, tight enough to show off the barely there baby bump she thought I hadn't noticed. The service at church was the same as every year. A packed house, 600 people crammed in. Pastor Robert gave his sermon about gratitude and family, looking at me several times as he talked about the bonds that tie us together and the sacred trust between husband and wife. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. God sees our hearts, he thundered. He knows our true intentions. There is no hiding from his sight. After the service, there was the usual mingling in the lobby. Handshakes, hugs, small talk. Pastor Robert worked the room like a politician, touching base with all the important people while Susan flitted around. I was handing out leftover programs and reminding the special guests about dinner when I spotted Emily by the coffee table, checking her phone. When she saw me, she gave a small nod. Everything was set. People started arriving at the house around 1 p.m. The usual crowd of church elders and their wives, Becky's brother and his family, her grandmother from the fancy retirement home in the city, a couple of cousins, and this year's special guests, a doctor and his wife who had just moved to town and were church shopping, along with a real estate developer considering donating land for a new youth center. By 1:45, everyone was there, milling around with non-alcoholic drinks. Baptists don't drink where other Baptists can see them. I kept an eye on the door and my phone, waiting for Derek's text. At 1:55, my phone buzzed. In position. 5 minutes. I took a deep breath and started guiding people to their seats. Pastor Robert wants to get started, I announced. Everyone, find your name cards, please. Becky sat next to me, seeming nervous. I realized she was probably planning to announce her pregnancy during dinner. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Her dad stood at the head of the table and said, "Before we begin this wonderful meal, I'd like to say a few words of thanks." Right on cue, the doorbell rang. Susan started to get up, but Pastor Robert waved her down. "You sit. I'm sure it's just a late arrival." He headed for the door, still wearing his carving apron. I heard him say, "I'm sorry. We're in the middle of a family dinner." Then Derek, clear and professional, said, "I'm looking for Rebecca Mitchell." There was a pause. Then Pastor Robert called out, his voice strained, "Becky, there's someone here for you." The room went quiet. All eyes were on Becky as she stood up, confused, and walked to the door where her father stood with a stone face, Derek holding several envelopes. "These are for you," he said, handing her the largest envelope. "And these are for Robert and Susan Johnson." He handed 2 more to Pastor Robert, who took them automatically. "You've been served." "Have a nice day," Derek said. Becky stood frozen as Pastor Robert looked like he'd seen a ghost. I leaned back and watched as she opened the envelope. The room went dead silent as she saw the first page and then looked at me. I stared back, calm as could be. No yelling, no drama, just facts. She wanted secrets and now nobody had any. Her face went white, then red. "What is this?" she whispered. "I believe the technical term is petition for dissolution of marriage," I said loud enough for everyone to hear, along with evidence of adultery, paternity fraud, and conspiracy to deceive. "There are copies for your parents too, since they're named as co-conspirators." Her dad was ripping open his envelopes, scanning the contents with growing horror. Susan hadn't opened hers. She was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. I stood up slowly, making sure I had everyone's attention, then pulled out my phone and showed a video of Becky and Jason leaving a hotel, kissing in the parking lot. The timestamp was clear, 2 months ago when she was supposedly at a marketing conference in Cincinnati. "I've got about 6 hours of this stuff," I said, turning the phone so everyone could see, plus the texts, bank records, and of course, the paternity test I'll be requesting for that baby she's carrying. Spoiler alert, it's not mine. That's when Katie, Jason's wife, stood up fast. "What baby? What is he talking about?" Jason looked like he might throw up. "I can explain," he said. "Explain what?" I asked, still calm. "Explain how you've been sleeping with my wife, how you're the father of her baby, how her parents helped cover it all up." Pastor Robert finally spoke. "This is outrageous. How dare you come into my home and make these accusations?" I laughed, actually laughed. "Accusations? You've got the proof in your hands, Pastor. Page 12 has the text messages where you told Becky to be more careful and discussed how to handle the pregnancy. Pretty detailed for accusations, don't you think?" The look on his face was worth every penny I'd spent. Becky was flipping through the papers. "Where did you get all this? How did you? Then she saw Emily calmly recording everything on her phone. You did this, Becky said. Emily shrugged. Guess your dad's threats didn't work as well as you thought. Katie had grabbed Jason's envelope and was reading through it, crying. 6 months! You've been doing this for 6 months! She exclaimed, looking at Becky, who couldn't meet her eyes and just stared at the floor. The other guests were frozen, some edging toward the door. I let the silence hang for a minute, then stood up. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone, I said to Becky. I'd say I hope the kid's healthy, but I'd be lying. And for the rest of you, maybe next time, don't cover up someone else's mess. Your pastor isn't lying. It's a sin in your book. Then I walked out and didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could hear the chaos starting. Katie was screaming at Jason while a robber tried to restore order. Susan was crying and someone knocked over a chair. I kept walking to my truck. By the time I hit the highway, my phone was blowing up with texts from Becky. How could you do this? We need to talk. I'm sorry. Please come back. Voicemails from her dad ranged from threatening to pleading. And there was even one from Susan, sobbing so hard I could barely make out the words. I turned my phone off and kept driving. The motel was waiting, and after that, a new life far away from this mess. Emily texted me later that night when I briefly turned my phone back on. Holy mess, it was chaos after you left. Jason's wife threw a gravy boat at him. It caught him right in the forehead. When can I get the other half of my money? I replied. I already transferred it. Thanks for the show. It was worth every penny. She wrote back, best Thanksgiving ever. I had to agree. As I sat in that dingy motel room, I felt better than I had in months. No more lies, no more pretenders. Tomorrow I'd call Marcus to check on the next steps. Tonight, I'd sleep soundly for the first time in weeks, knowing I'd served up the cold dish of revenge that those people so richly deserved.